There's a moment that catches a lot of retirees off guard. It doesn't happen when you apply for Social Security. It doesn't happen when your first payment arrives. It happens later. You're sitting at your kitchen table, maybe going through your taxes, and suddenly you realize something doesn't add up. Your benefit feels smaller than it should be. Not because your check changed, but because something quietly started taking a piece of it. And here's the uncomfortable truth. For millions of Americans, that something isn't new at all. It's been there for decades. Most people just don't notice it till it starts affecting them. And by then, it already has. Let me ask you a simple question. Have you ever looked at your Social Security and wondered, why am I paying taxes on money I already earned? If that thought has crossed your mind, you're not alone, because what's happening behind the scenes is far more complicated than most people realize, and in some cases, far more expensive. Here's where things start to get interesting. When Social Security taxes were first introduced, they were never meant to affect the majority of retirees. In fact, the system was designed so that only a small percentage of higher income individuals would ever pay tax on their benefits. That was the original idea. But today, a completely different reality has taken shape. And it didn't happen because lawmakers suddenly raised taxes. It happened because something didn't change. Let's break this down in a way that actually makes sense. The government doesn't simply look at your total income and decide if your Social Security is taxable. Instead, they use a separate formula, one that many people don't even realize exists. It's called a combined income calculation. And here's how it works in simple terms. They take your regular income, add certain types of additional income, and then include a portion of your Social Security benefits. That final number determines whether your benefits are taxed and how much of them are exposed. Sounds straightforward, right? But here's the problem. The thresholds tied to this calculation have barely changed in decades. Now think about what has changed. Inflation, cost of living, benefit increases. Everything has gone up over time, including your Social Security payments. So even if your lifestyle hasn't improved much, even if you're just keeping up with rising costs, that formula still sees your income as higher. And slowly, year after year, more retirees cross into taxable territory, not because they got richer, but because the system stayed frozen while everything else moved forward. That's why today, a large portion of retirees end up paying federal tax on their benefits, and many of them never expected it. But that's only part of the story, because depending on where you live, there may be a second layer. Yes, on top of federal taxes, some states also have their own rules, and this is where things can vary dramatically. In most parts of the country, Social Security benefits are protected at the state level. But in a small group of states, that protection isn't fully there. Instead, your benefits can be partially included in your state taxable income, depending on your earnings. Now, here's something most people don't realize. Living in one of these states doesn't automatically mean you'll pay state tax in your Social Security. It all comes down to your income level. Some states offer deductions, credits, or exemptions that reduce or even eliminate the tax entirely. But if your income crosses certain limits, that protection starts to fade. And that's where people get caught off guard. Let's make this practical. Imagine two retirees living in the same state. They both receive Social Security. They both have small additional income sources, but one stays just below a key threshold, and the other crosses slightly above it. The result? One pays nothing. The other suddenly owes state tax on part of their benefits. That difference can come down to just a few $1,000s of income. And this is where smart planning makes a real difference. Because once you understand how these thresholds work, you can start making small adjustments that have a big impact. For example, timing matters. When you withdraw money from retirement accounts, that income doesn't just affect your bank balance. It affects how your benefits are taxed. So taking a larger withdrawal in 1 year versus spreading it out across multiple years can completely change your tax situation. Another factor is how different income sources interact. Pensions, investment income, part-time work, they all feed into the same calculation. And sometimes it's not about earning less. It's about structuring income more efficiently. Now here's something encouraging. There have been recent changes designed to give retirees some breathing room. Certain deductions and adjustments can lower your taxable income, which can, in turn, reduce how much of your Social Security is exposed to tax. But here's the catch. These benefits aren't automatic. They only work if you understand them and actually apply them correctly. That's the part most people miss. There's no notification, no alert. No one calls you to say, hey, you could reduce your taxes this year. So, unless you actively look into it, you may end up paying more than necessary without even realizing it. And this brings us to something important. If there's one takeaway from all of this, it's this. Your Social Security tax situation is not fixed. It's not something that just happens to you. In many cases, it's something you can influence. Not by doing anything complicated, not by taking risks, but simply by understanding where the lines are and how close you are to them. Because those lines, the thresholds, are what determine everything. They decide whether your benefits are taxed, how much is taxed, and whether you owe anything at all at the state level. And here's where things get really interesting. Even small adjustments can move you from one side of that line to the other. A slightly lower withdrawal, a different timing strategy, a deduction you didn't use before. Any of these can change the outcome. Which means two retirees with nearly identical finances can end up with completely different tax bills. So the question isn't just, how much am I earning? The real question is, how is my income being counted? Because that's what the system is actually looking at. Now, before we wrap up, let me ask you something. Do you know where your current income sits relative to these thresholds? Most people don't. And that's exactly why so many are surprised when tax season comes around. But once you know your position, you're no longer guessing. You're making decisions with clarity. And that's powerful, because when it comes to retirement income, even small improvements can add up to meaningful savings over time. So, if this topic affects you, or someone you care about, don't keep it to yourself. Share this information. Have the conversation. Because a single insight like this can save someone hundreds, sometimes thousands, over the years. And if you want to stay updated on changes that impact your Social Security, retirement income, and benefits, Make sure to subscribe, because these rules do change. And the people who stay informed are always in a better position than those who don't. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.